IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend, Colin Hahn. The world of technology and healthcare are ever-changing, new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways, which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. On today's episode, we'll be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of healthcare event marketing. And be sure to follow the show on Twitter using the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 17 years of health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. So, Colin, are you tired of going to conferences?
Well, I am tired, but not tired from going to conferences. I mean, it's so much fun to see everyone and check out new technologies. I don't think I'd ever get tired of it.
Yeah, well, you're kind of addicted. That's fine.
Yeah.
But no, but I think it was interesting. As we're recording this, we're just finishing up the HLTH, the health conference, and it's interesting. Some people, it was their first conference back, and yet we've been to dozens. So it's like such an interesting perspective. Like people are still so excited to be together. Like the hugs feel better, even like a year into going to more conferences, they still feel just as good.
That's true. Actually, for this conference, this was the first time I'd seen some of these folks. In 4 years now, and they hadn't been back on the circuit yet. So yeah, for a lot of them, this was the first one back, and it was exciting, and you get the hugs and everything. So it was good. And it is fun. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, for this episode, we want to kind of mix it up, and you're kind of the lead for this, since you're the marketing guy. I'm the tech guy, right? So as I look at it, like maybe our CIOs will tune out, or maybe they'll be like, "Yeah, that's exactly right. They need to listen to John and Colin more." But let's talk about this. Like, do healthcare customers really go to conferences and events to buy?
Great question. I think it depends on the conference. I think for some of the healthcare organizations that I hear from and that I talk to that are at conferences, they're coming to these conferences with a mission. I'm on the hunt for a patient experience tool, or I'm on the hunt for a new CRM, or I'm on the hunt for X or Y clinical tools. So I do think that there are customers who buy. The question is, which conferences are they going to find this information? And I don't think it's every conference.
Interesting.
But I do think it's there. I think it really depends on what the content's going to be, and as well as what the aim of the conference really is.
Well, I think you're pointing out someone who's going in specifically like, ooh, I need to fill this hole as part of our strategic plan, and we're going to be doing RFPs, whatever, right? So they're starting to understand that process. I had a really interesting experience at a user conference that I was at. I was having lunch with them, and they met someone in the exhibit booth that was a partner of this EHR vendor, and they were like, hey, do you know about them? I'm going to go right there and just buy it. It's awesome. And I was like, this has never happened in the history of conferences. Maybe it felt like, right? And interestingly, she was from an FQHC, so she had the control. She had the budget. She's like, I'm going to go buy it. I've wanted this solution. And she literally said that to me as we finished our lunch. She's like, I'm going over there. I'm going to go buy it right now. I was like, wow, I haven't seen that much.
And actually, you bring up a good point. Like, I think one of the sets of conferences that I think are going to do well into the next year and will continue to do well for a while is user conferences. Because whether it's your EHR or whatever main tool that you're using, I think that is where hey, any solution that's here is at least working with my main vendor, and so it's integrated, it talks to each other, and all of those kinds of pluses. Those are really good conferences where I think you get buyers. Where I don't think you get buyers are general healthcare shows. I'll just use the example of like CES. I don't think anyone's going to CES going, I need to go and buy like X or Y product. I think what they're there to do is browse, just to see what's new, what's innovative. And I think, unfortunately, there's going to be fewer and fewer of those types of people because as budget gets cut, as time becomes more precious, I just don't think they have time to browse a show with 1,000 vendors in it, just kind of looking. Right? I think they have to be very purposeful.
Yeah, I mean, I think CES is its own
its own beast.
Yeah, it's 170,000 people, and so I'm sure there's buying often with vendors and other. But in the digital health space, I think you're right. Like, I don't think a lot of provider organizations go there looking to buy. It's more like, oh, what's innovative, what's happening, it's interesting. So I think that is an interesting evolution. I think the other thing for me is that so many vendors we talk to in our HITMIT community, right, which is our healthcare marketing community, when we talk to them, they're like, well, I've got to go there so I can sell stuff. And even the salespeople I talk to, they're like, I need to sell stuff. And the smart ones that I talk to are like, no, you don't sell at the conference. you build the relationship at the conference so that then later you could eventually sell to them, right? And so whether it's going out to the evening parties and getting the experiences and sharing it so that then you learn what their real needs are so that then later you can sell to them, or whether you're getting a list that then you need to nurture and do nurturing campaigns to be able to, wait until the timing is right for them to buy. But now you're in front of them. Now you're building a relationship of trust. You're building that understanding, your perspective on how to solve the problems. Oh wait, now that's my problem. So now I've seen you over the last 6 months. Now I can do it. And maybe the lead came from the conference, but they didn't okay, I saw you at the conference. Now you want to buy. I don't think that happens really.
No, you're right, and I think that's a really good distinction. I think buy yours go to certain conferences, but whether a buying activity, like an actual purchase happening at a conference, that is exceedingly rare.
Yeah.
It might happen because this is like the last meeting, and you've met with them for the last 6 months, and you just happen to be at a conference together. Sure, that happens. But you're right. The conferences nowadays is really more about solidifying that relationship. So it's either someone that's already in your funnel, or maybe someone that you're just meeting for the first time, and now you're just kind of early on. Yeah, exactly. It is mostly about that.
Yeah, interesting. So I mean, it's such an interesting perspective as you look at events, right? And how do you do it? But let's talk about this. We've been to a bunch of events in this fall. Conferences are back, that's for sure. But what company event marketing effort really stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I'll start by talking about some of the booths I see, because that's very visual, and I love the visual stuff. I have to give kudos to Salesforce. Their booth is just phenomenal. It's that forest theme, and it's very natural and organic, and in a sea of white booths with walls, this one is like a forest, right? And so it stands out, and when you're in it, it just feels different. It feels, you're relaxed a bit more, which obviously is the purpose. And they've extended that to their meeting rooms.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's interesting. You have to decide what conference you want to go to and how to approach it. Are there buyers or not? I think that's interesting. Well, we've been to a lot of conferences. Fall conference season was as hectic and busy as usual, ever, right? But which company event marketing efforts have you seen this fall that really stand out to you?
Yeah, for me, I got to give kudos to Salesforce. Their booth, especially, was outstanding. It's got a forest theme going on. It's definitely more organic in feel than every other booth. I mean, every other booth sort of the white walls and the logos and things like that. Very harsh corners. This one is it is like being in nature, even though it's not nature. But it
close
just
as you can, even the sounds.
Exactly. Yeah, they have the sounds. They have tree stumps instead of those little cubes, and it just has that feel where you're like, wow, this is different. You're kind of relaxed as you go into the booth.
Does that help with sales though? That's my fear. I'm with you. It felt different. They even had this side hallway meeting room, and it had the same continuity, which was cool. But I'm like, does it help with sales? I don't know.
Let me put it this way: I don't know if it'll actually drive any more sales, because I think that just boils down to your products and whether or not they can solve a problem. But I will say that it is noticeable. When you're looking at the Salesforce booth, you don't even have to see the name. You go, oh, that's Salesforce, right? And when you see their printed materials or their PDFs and their emails, it's got that character, it's got that feel, and it's all tied together. So in terms of integrated event marketing, got to give kudos to Salesforce, because that, to me, it just stands out. That visual theme, they carry it right through everything they've done.
Yeah. There was one at Health that really was fascinating for me, and it actually was, the branding across the whole event. There was emails, there was all sorts of things that was done with this. I think they've even done rideshare advertising. It was they went all out in this investment, and that was Nomi Health. But Nomi Health wasn't the one that did it. It was Go Fund Yourself. So they created a fake company and divided their booth in half. And half of the booth was this fake company called Go Fund Yourself, right? That's just talking about the absurdity that is healthcare and many of the things that are in healthcare. And then on the other side, they had this portal that went through the booth from the Go Fund Yourself to Nomi Health. And they would have people, because they were attracting the attention of what's Go Fund Yourself, right? And they're like, yeah, it's a parody, right? I get it. And then why don't you come through and see what
really happens,
what the organization can really do to help you in this kind of screwed up world of healthcare. And so I thought that was pretty creative. I think there were some interesting execution challenges, maybe, right? Of people thought it's a real company. That's what I thought when I saw it. I was like, is this a real company? this is going, you know. But and if I hadn't made it to the booth, I would have been like, oh, what is this, right? I would have thought it was real, and I didn't make the connection to Know Me Health. But luckily, I did make it to the booth, so I got the connection. But you know, so that's the only thing that was kind of, but definitely stood out, right? It felt different, right? And you know, go fund yourself as a creative prime, which I'm all about.
I think I also got a shout out to companies that actually have physical products, because one of the things that I think is very much missing in the digital health world, it's not very tangible, right? Yes, you can see the demo on the screen, but there's something different about touching and feeling the products. And so I got to give kudos to companies like Neurologix and anybody who's making medical devices, where you're just able to walk up and try the kiosk, right? Like Phreesia does this, right? You walk up and try it and enter the forums and those kinds of things. I think that can be really a long-lasting impression, long after the conference is over. So I think that in terms of you can make, if you can put in your booth or put in your conference something where you can experience the product in context, I think you're doing pretty well. I think that's a really good tactic.
Yeah, and I actually did some work with LG and Amwell. They had the whole setup of integrating the LG TVs with the Amwell product, and how can you do virtual sitter. And you could literally demo it. They put it in a meeting room, which was interesting, so it was a little off, a quiet place that you could actually test it rather than, in the conference area that's so loud and noisy or whatever. And we did a full demo of it, so you can watch for that at Healthcare IT Today. You can see that video. But another one that was really cool was VenMinder. They have these Venn monsters that they've created, which I think was pretty interesting, like to see these Venn monsters, right? It was playful, it was creative. It made you stop and be like, well, what's this about? Talk to us about this and help us understand how what do you do, right? But it was very playful, artistic, right? That felt different than just, a bunch of words on the screen. And I was shocked how many people. So at the health conference, they have a Petunia, which is like their mascot, which is this unicorn hippopotamus kind of thing. And so many people were like, hey, check out this picture I got of Petunia. I'm like, what the frick? Like, why are you talking about Petunia? And they're like, gave me all sorts of credibility with my kids. They loved it. And I was like, okay. And they wanted pictures with Petunia. So it's interesting when you take something playful, it attracts attention. The question is, how do you bridge to the actual, content discussion about how you can help them?
Yeah. I will have to give you a negative one. One of the tactics that I think should be ended is hucksters in the booth. Like the magicians, the illusionists, and those things. I know it's kind of cool to see a magic trick, but to me, it doesn't help you. Like, it's not extremely memorable. Maybe for that moment I would go, oh, that was interesting. But as soon as the trick's over, it's not like I'm sticking around in your booth listening to your demo, right? Like, to me, and it just interrupts the conversation. Like, you have this magician off to the side doing his or her thing, and then you're trying to have a discussion about furthering the relationship on the other side of your booth. Unless you have like a 40 by 40 booth, like you're watching the magician, right? Yeah. So I'm not convinced any of those huckster-ish kinds of things are really that great event marketing tactic.
Yeah, I've seen one that works pretty good. And that's the pool guy, the trick shot pool guy. But what he does is he integrates the message into him doing the trick shot. And so that was pretty cool, right? Because you're actually sitting there and you're like, I want to see this trick shot. And he builds it up, right? He's building the trick shot as you do it. And you're like, oh, this is going to be fun to watch. And then he'd be like, and as you build this, you need to build your infrastructure to be reliable and secure. And so he would integrate the message of the company into it. And so then you were getting it while doing it. That one kind of works for me. So I'm okay with him, and plus trick shots are just cool.
That's Hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. And yes, we are in person together once again to record our podcast. Today we are talking about healthcare marketing and healthcare events. So, John, again, we're just finishing Health 2022. We've been to a lot of conferences. What, in your mind, is there a value to speaking at a healthcare conference? Because I know everyone really tries to get a speaker there. Is it really a good payoff?
Yeah, I'm a little torn, right? And I'm with you, right? Like in our HIPMA community, right? The healthcare marketing community, they're all like, how do I get speakers? In fact, there's entire companies that do the call for speaker submission process because it's so cumbersome and they value it so much. I think the question is, it depends on the conference. It's kind of like, and maybe the answer for the whole thing is it depends, right? But, if you're going to a HEMA or an MGMA, where the sessions are just packed, then yeah, you definitely want a speaking one. Now you need to think about what am I going to present and how am I going to feature the company in a way that's going to make sense without feeling like a sales pitch. People don't do that well all the time, right? So if you do that, you might actually alienate everyone and be like, man, I never want to go with them. These people just want to sell me, and it doesn't feel like substance and all that, right? So you got to be careful on what you present and how you present it and how you do it with the customer often, which is usually the case at most conferences. But other conferences. Here, I was just at a conference and I was talking to a guy from Perfect Target, right? He's at a provider organization, has I don't know if it's C-level, at least just below C-level position, buys lots of products, and he's like, I haven't been to a single session. He's like, I don't believe any of them. They're just not quality content. Hear him spouting, the usual terms and stuff with no substance. And so he's like, I haven't been to a single one. So I think that's the problem at a lot of conferences is if they don't trust the content, then the sessions really aren't going to be valuable from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think it's always worthwhile to get a speaking slot for one reason. It puts into the public record that you and your customer are actually together,
that's a good
right?
point.
So because usually people insist on bringing a customer, or some organizers say you can only speak if you bring a customer. So I think that there's value in just having that fact that you and your customer spoke, because if you can't get a case study, you can at least say to the world, "Hey, we presented together at this conference."
Yeah, that's true.
But to your point, I think you really have to understand the nature and the culture of a conference to know whether or not speaking at it is going to be really worthwhile. To your point, if people aren't even going to the sessions, or it's or it's just new people going to those sessions,
It's your competitor going to the session,
right? then it might not be worth it. It may not be worth it. But if for some of the ones where they're getting CE credits and those things where they're packed, then yes, definitely that it is worth it, and it is worth putting in the effort. Plus, there's always that goodwill that you're earning from your own client, right? That you're, hey, like we thought enough about your implementation, your success, that we want to put you on a pedestal at this conference. I think that there's a little bit of goodwill that you can earn.
Which is really interesting, right? Because there's two types of customers. There's the customer you have to beg, borrow, and steal to get them on stage. And then there's the other customer who's like, oh, you gave me a gift and you invited me to come speak on stage. And they're like, thank you for promoting us and for me and for honoring us that we were worthy to be on stage, etc. Like, it's interesting, these kind of two spectrum, right? Because on the one side, they're like, why do I want to be on stage? What's the value I get, right? But then you also have the some that are aspirational and want to be on stage. That's a tough thing to balance as well.
Definitely is. But again, definitely worth it if you can. The one time I will say, if you're just going to get up there, though, and just do a sales pitch, please don't do that. Because that is, no one will like that. You'll have an empty, your room will literally empty out. Because I think the message is finally getting through to people. Hey, if that session is not for you and it's not interesting, you can get up and leave.
Yeah, and people are doing that more and more. I think, that I do that. I think the younger generation is like, hey, if it's not valuable, I'm just cutting out. Like, I don't care what impression. Like, I think before maybe that was a little different. Maybe there were different communities. How do you look at it, panel versus speaking session as well? I kind of like the panels when it's a great panel, because then there's like a synergy of multiple companies or multiple organizations driving people to attend the session. So that's the argument, I think, for the panel. Whereas, a speaking session, you can get into more of the weeds of the results and the value that did it. And obviously you're featured because it's just you, and your customer or whoever, right? So how do you look at that, panel versus speaking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think panels are more entertaining for the audience. I think people love the different perspectives. And I think, if you have a good moderator and they're asking really edgy, top of mind questions, I think it'd be fantastic. But I think if you're there to learn, I think you learn more from the lecture style and from like a small number of presenters, like 2 presenters kind of thing. I feel, like you said, you can go deeper into the topic.
That's interesting.
So I think that's the difference. If you're just looking to entertain, if you're looking to give the perspective, and you have like some thought leaders that you want to highlight, then a panel is going to be much more entertaining. And I think a lot more people are, especially like us who go to so many conferences, we're more apt to go to the panels.
That's true,
right? So I think there's that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other aspect as we kind of wrap up this episode is media attention, right? A lot of people go to conferences because the media is there, right? And I think that's ebbed and flowed, depending on the conference as well, which I think, maybe that's a topic for another day. But, how do you see it as attracting media attention to the conference? Are you a coffee and drinks guy, or, are you more of a pizza and ice cream guy like me?
I am coffee and drinks for sure.
Okay.
For sure. But no, I think the key to making a conference super successful today, I mean, yes, you want to get leads. Yes, you want to further relationships with potential customers. Those are all, yes.
Or existing ones too, right?
You have to do that. But I think where I see the cherry on top, the value that you can truly get from a conference will be media attention. Because if I can't get any of the other stuff, at least I can get media attention. Or at least I can forge a new relationship with some folks in the media, because I might need them when I do my next product announcement and so forth. And we're all there. We all are on the same circuit and go to all the same shows. I would make it a point to find out who's there from the media side and try to get set up a meeting. Even if I'm not going to give them an interview. It'd be wonderful if I could get one.
You might even not get a mention in an article.
Yeah, but if I got 5 minutes with somebody, right? And I appreciate that when people come up and say, hey, listen, I haven't got a story for you right now, but just wanted to meet you, and I followed your stuff, I read this article. I'll remember that person the next time they send me a pitch. Now, and if they remind me, hey, we met at such and such a conference, it makes a big difference. So that to me is something that you should definitely try to make an attempt to do. And most conference organizers will give you the list of the media who are coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I look at it, the key to getting the attention is just remembering that the media are human too. That's HitMEC principle number 3,
Right.
in our HitMEC Bible of marketing principles in that community. It's they're humans, right? So what do humans want? One, they want good relationships, right? And good engagement and connection. They want you to make it easy for them, right? And I can say we want, right? If you make it hard for them to tell the story, why would we ever want to spend time, right? If I'm having to dig to understand what's the story or what's the perspective that's unique, that's awful. That's misery. That's the opposite of what you want, right? And very few media will do that, to try to dig in. And it's you should make it super easy for them to know what your perspective is and what is the story that you can help enhance what they're doing so that they can do their job, right? And understanding what is their job, right? Are they an investigative? Are they a breaking news? Are they a thought leader that wants to be seen as a thought leader? And how can you support that goal of the journalist or the media person that's doing it, right? Because, for us, if you reach out with an embargo, we're not breaking news people, right? We don't break news really, right? That's not what we do. So an embargo doesn't really influence us into thinking we'll honor it, that's fine, we'll be respectful, but I'm not ready to break news, so that's not who we are, so don't lead with that, right? Maybe you still do it for whatever reason because you want to keep it private, but it's understanding that and making it easy for them is always the key.
Yeah, and definitely, you hear it all the time. As you get to know a media person or a journalist, and you get to know what they like to cover, you should give them more of that. People have started to get to know that I like surveys, I like data, I like statistics. And so if I see those in the pitch, I'm more apt to read it. You're right. If you've got a new embargo on a new feature or function, it's going to be pretty rare that I pick that one up or respond to that. Because like you said, we're not breaking news kind of people. We know other outlets do that.
Sure. And
so we'll let them do that. We're more about, show me the numbers. Let's talk about the results that you've gotten from this new feature. That I'm more interested in. So yeah, I would definitely say that. The other thing I would say is just do your homework, right? I would just go back to what kind of media person do you want to be, that you want to get covered by? A podcaster is very different than a journalist at a publication, and very different from someone else who is just on LinkedIn. So there's I think media, the definition of media has definitely changed over the years. It's no longer just journalists working in a newsroom.
Yeah, and I think the paid opportunities have evolved as well, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of paid opportunities with a lot of journalists now that, before would have been unbecoming, but now it's just been a normal part of it. And I look at it for a lot of them, it depends on the organization, they're paying for priority. Because if there's 850 vendors or 1,300 vendors, right, or even hundreds of vendors, there's usually only a few journalists. You can't get to everything, right? So the question is, how are you going to get priority? And sometimes it's being interesting enough, and that works fine, right? Or having a thought leader that is so good that they want to cover. And other times you have to pay because, if you have a run-of-the-mill solution that doesn't have, isn't on the strategic priority of some other CIOs, but maybe you want to get that message out, then, paying's an option. I think the other way, if they really want to get at Colin, they just need a sci-fi reference. If the subject has a Star Wars reference, and then there's a little quote from Yoda about why you should cover, I'm pretty sure you'd cover that.
Yeah, that's actually very accurate. if there is a comic book sci-fi reference in anyone's pitch,
breaking news,
I will definitely. You're guaranteed a read, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna get a response because you at least put the effort in to put that in there.
Exactly. But it's the personalization.
It is. And likewise, I think if someone comes up to you and offers some form of ice cream or cheesecake, I think.
Ooh, cheesecake, that's true too. Or like, hey, we're gonna be dancing at our booth.
That's right. You're doing TikToks in the booth. Yeah, John's there, or karaoke.
I don't know if I'm gonna be on a TikTok, but yeah, you're right.
Hey, listen, for all of you that are listening, watching, you've heard John and I mention HitMake a few times, and that is, of course, our healthcare and IT marketing community that we run. We have our conference happening in 2023 here in Vegas, February 1st to the 3rd. And it's a gathering where a lot of folks from healthcare IT companies that are in marketing are going to gather, share ideas, and just really commiserate on one hand, but also get inspired on the other hand. It's a fantastic conference. If you want to find out more, just head on over to hitmake.com, and there's right at the top, there's a little link that you go to find out more about the conference, and we hope to see you next year here in Vegas.
Yeah, and what's great about HitMake is if you've been to all these health IT conferences, you've been standing next to each other for weeks and days, and you never get a chance to talk. At HitMake, all the healthcare marketing professionals, B2B largely, come together and share those ideas and really, like you said, be inspired, learn, grow, connect, learn of new resources. So hope you can join us in Vegas.
That's right. Hitmake.com, HITMC.com. And hey, thanks to all of you who tuned in and listening to this episode of Healthcare IT Today. For more details about our program, check out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please engage with the community on healthcareittoday.com and on Twitter using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung along with my health IT collaborator, John Lin. Thanks for listening and watching.